Kate McBride, one of the things that we've seen is a rise of independence and people looking elsewhere. In the bush, what's landing there? And we're seeing a lot of an independent movement as well in rural seats, aren't we? Why?
Absolutely. I think it's often painted as a bit of a, people in the cities that only care about, climate change and ICAC. But this is a massive trend, and it's people turning off the major parties, and getting behind people that they know what they stand for. And it's really important things, and it's people right across Australia. And I think that's one of the most important things that I think comes with these independents is they're real people and we know what they stand for. They're putting their constituents first instead of the party. And I think too often with the two major parties, we often see, they vote with the party and not what the people that have chosen for them to represent. So I think that's a real failure of the two-party system. And I'm really excited about these independents. I think having more women in Parliament, having people that want action on climate change. I mean, people want that. 78% of regional Australians think we're already experiencing climate change. This isn't a city problem. We're often painted by the National Party to say that we don't care about climate change. It's simply not true. We're on the front lines of this. So I think it's important to exactly your point that this is going big out in the bush too. Before we go any further though, Helen Haines has put policy up about a federal ICAC. The incredible independent has put this up, and this is like one of the incredible things about independence. She has put legislation up to have an ICAC. One of your, don't think minister, but one of your MPs did cross the floor to actually support this. We know, the Australia Institute has done research, 80% of Australians want a federal ICAC. It's so clear, and yet the legislation's been up there, and you guys voted it down. You don't want this.
Kate, in terms of where people are in rural, Megan made the point that that there is, according to the polling, widespread support. We've seen that before with things like the Republican issue. When it comes to a referendum, when you look at a model and when you look at the political contest of that model, it is so much more difficult because of the double jeopardy. You need to get a majority in a majority of states. Do you believe that that is possible? What are you picking up from where you sit?
From my experience and from out where I live, so we've had a few really tough years with water along the Darling-Barker River system, mass fish kills, dry riverbeds. The one thing that's come out of that has been the uniting of the Barkindji people out our way and white people. And it has been the most incredible experience for me to actually learn and grow, be taught by Aboriginal people. I really see it as just such a gift, and the statement from the heart is like just so incredible. I feel so privileged to be sitting up on stage with you here virtually. But like I see it our way, the relationship that happens between our traditional owners and the people out our way, it's really special. And any way that I can support it and the people out our way can support it is, it's heartwarming.
Chris Bowen wouldn't answer this, but to go from a 45 2030 target in 2019 to a 43 in this must say something. What does it say about the concern in the electorate and that Labor may have about getting elected if it is more ambitious?
Yeah, it's certainly backtracking, isn't it? I think it astounds me when I hear as well politicians saying we can't afford to do this when we are funding, giving fossil fuel companies $11.6 billion a year. We can afford, as Australians, we can afford to do whatever we want. It's just a matter of choice. And when we are giving billions upon billions of dollars to these massive companies that, as Osher said, don't pay tax, that's not what we need. And every single dollar that we fund this, we're pushing climate action to the back of our minds, but we're also not spending money in regional communities or even in our cities on health, on services, on all these things that we critically need.
Is it not also a reality, and this also is the case in rural communities where there are jobs associated with fossil fuel industries, jobs associated with coal, where coal is still among the biggest, if not the biggest, export? Are there not also questions about what Australia does vis-a-vis what other countries in the rest of the world do? And when you have big countries like China or India pushing those targets down the line, what can a difference can a country like Australia make? And how do we get that balance between jobs now, jobs in the future, and the need to be responsible to changes in the climate.
This is the rhetoric that we hear, is that we can't do this because it's going to cost jobs. We know that there are jobs in renewables. And the other thing that we know is that in these like coal communities, and it's exactly the same in water with cotton communities, okay? There are more nurses in these communities than there are coal miners or cotton workers. This is the thing that we need to think about. So this rhetoric of jobs, 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 it's just not true. If we were actually investing in these communities, and we know that a lot of these regional communities as well need more nurses and GPs. We've got people dying from diseases and things that they shouldn't be doing this. If we actually cared, we'd be putting money into them, funding more nurses, creating more jobs, and like focusing on that, on creating more livable rural centres and focusing on renewables, because that's the future. The gas is not the future.
We're doing it.
Hi, my question's for Kate. So considering the effects of climate stresses on mental health, what should feature in a long-term policy to ensure that rural Australians have access to quality services with these catastrophes only expected to worsen in Australia's future?
Yeah, it's a big question. There's a lot of things that need to be done in regional Australia, and I think the first thing is just putting the focus back onto them. Like, we are the ones that are really struggling through a lot of these issues. I was looking at some statistics, and when I was born, out in the far western New South Wales, people out my way had a longer life expectancy than people in Sydney. Today, we are 5 years less. We know there are some serious problems out there. We know with suicide, self-harm rates, they're about twice the rate of people in the cities, and we don't have the services there to actually be able to help these people. And we've been the forgotten people for so long, and I think, it goes to our Aboriginal brothers and sisters as well, exactly the same. Out in the far west, we're 13% Aboriginal population. So we do have a lot of these similar problems, and it's not investing in health and education and, even aged care services and all these things. Like, all we need to do is start investing in regional Australia, and we want to make them places where people want to live. We saw with COVID, this sort of movement with people going, nah, I've had enough of the cities, I want to go out into regional areas, but we don't even have digital connectivity. I mean, like, if I am really struggling and I want to call up someone to, like, Beyond Blue to have a chat about something, most places I can't even do that. I saw on the front of a newspaper today, there was a bloke who had a farm accident, and he was 60 k's out of Narromine, I think it was, and he didn't have phone range. And it was like he broke like pretty much every bone in his body, and somehow he survived. But like, this is what we're surviving with. And honestly, like, you feel a bit like second-class citizens a lot of the time. And all it takes is a bit of investment. And I think city people are ready for that. They want to. We saw during the droughts and fires, you guys care about us. Unfortunately, it's our government that doesn't. And I really want to see whoever gets in, at the next election. We really need to see some investment, because guys, we're on life support out there.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.